Diabetes Connections is brought to you by inhaled insulin, glucose management in the moment, and by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, Jeff Dachis founded OneDrop in 2014 after his own type 1 diagnosis. Known for its sleek meter design and then for on-demand telehealth services, OneDrop is now adding something new.
The G7, the Libre 3, they're great products that really meet the needs of those users. And we're not trying to be that. We're trying to create a purpose-built product that meets the needs of a different type of user who's making a different type of choice. And the choice has to be a different type of closed loop.
Jeff shares how that different choice could include what they're calling a continuous health sensor. We'll talk about what that term means, how OneDrop envisions it helping people with diabetes, and what keeps Jeff just as passionate as he was back in 2014. He does not hold back. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I'm always so glad to have you here. I am your host, Stacey Sims. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on those who use insulin. It's a bit hard for me to believe, but 16 years ago this week, we were just coming home from the hospital with little almost 2-year-old Benny. Yeah, his diaversary is right around this time of year. And if you're listening as this episode goes live the first week of December, 16 years ago, we would have just been getting out of the hospital and coming home with a pile of books and educational material and some diabetes supplies, and then running from pharmacy to figure out what the heck we needed. I've told our family's diagnosis story many times, but I'll be honest with you, I'm looking at it in a different way this year, and that is because Benny's almost 18 now. And gosh, I look at everything from a different perspective. You know, when your youngest kid is going to be 18 and is almost done with high school, everything looks a little different. I will say that I remember vividly sitting outside Benny's hospital room. He was sleeping, and I was reading the Sunday New York Times, going through all that paper back in the day. And I remember thinking, what can't he do now, right? How different is his life going to be? And letting all those fears kind of run through my head and making a list of questions. And it is remarkable to me that, I'm knocking on wood here, that none of those fears have come true. I didn't know a lot about diabetes, like many of you, before diagnosis, and we're still learning. But I gotta say, looking back, his childhood was not like I had feared. I thought it would be full of just restrictions and the word no and you can't. And sure, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, and diabetes definitely is difficult, but those fears never happened. So 16 years later, geez, I am very grateful. Okay, before we get to our guest, I want to let you know I've been doing a bunch of webinars this year, most of them with my good friend Anna Sabino. She is a certified diabetes care and education specialist. And we are doing another one this week. It is all about managing sick days calmly when you have a child with type 1. I've been through a bunch of sick days with Benny. Oh my goodness. And Anna and I are going to go through, what constitutes a true emergency, when do you want to think about going to the ER, sick day protocol, ketones, hydration, all that good stuff. I'll put a link in the show notes. That is this Thursday at noon Eastern time. You don't have to attend. We will record it. But if you want to watch the recording, you have to register. So pretty standard webinar stuff. Love doing these with Anna. We actually have a lot of fun, even though it's a serious topic. And as a diabetes educator, she can give advice that I cannot. I'm just there to tell been there type stories and let parents know it's going to be okay. Okay, my guest this week is Jeff Dachis. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as an adult in 2013, and he was pretty much appalled at what was available to him in terms of blood glucose monitoring and much, much else about diabetes. So he started OneDrop in 2014. I've talked to Jeff a couple of times before. We did a wide-ranging interview that I will link up about his background. Before this, he was the CEO and chairman of Razorfish, which was really early on in internet ads and reaching consumers and that sort of thing. Jeff, you may not know, is considered one of the early pioneers in the development of the internet. I'm sure he never thought he would start a diabetes company. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed what looked like a CGM on their website. And of course, I had to call Jeff and learn more. And of course, that got us rolling into this interview where he shares a lot more. And that is coming right up. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Afrezza. How many times have you miscalculated timing of a mealtime insulin dose? This happens to us a lot. You dose after you order, and then the restaurant gets busy and your meal takes longer than expected, or you just forget, or you bolus too late, and then you have to deal with the high blood sugars. If that happens to you, it might be time to think about Afrezza inhaled insulin. Afrezza uses a breath-powered inhaler to quickly deliver insulin powder into the lungs and bloodstream. It's fast in, fast out. In fact, with Afrezza, insulin is released into the bloodstream in less than 1 minute and may start to lower blood sugar in about 12 minutes. Ask your doctor if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium. It is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Jeff, thanks so much for making time for me. I understand you're busy. You're running around New York City right now.
Yes, indeed. And thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you taking the time.
You got it. I wanted to talk to you because a couple of weeks ago, I saw a news release, a report that basically talked about one drop and a CGM. What can you share with us about the development of a CGM at your company?
Well, let's see. There's both a lot to share and not that much to share all at the same time. As you know, developing medical devices is a relatively, or I'd say extremely complex endeavor. And there are multiple stages along that endeavor that have huge amounts of both resources and effort required to bring a product like that to market. I'll caveat that and say, and in the diabetes industry, as you know, after many, many, many years, there have been so many disappointments, right? So many hyped announcements and so many pretend or not real efforts to actually improve the lives of people with diabetes. I want to be cautious about what we share in the sense that I don't want to create any unnecessary or overhyped expectation. I also want to honor the hard work and effort that my team has been putting in by not screwing it up for them. So I want to make sure that, the conversation is, hey, we are really excited about the work that we're doing in continuous health sensing. And I chose those words carefully.
Yeah.
But I also want to acknowledge that there's still so much work left to do, so much lift left to carry, so much burden still yet to get over the hill that I don't want to overhype anything.
We'll get back to a couple of points you already brought up there, but I have to just stop and ask then, with all of those caveats and knowing how difficult this industry can be, and also knowing that there's something like 30 plus CGMs in development around the world, why even try to do this?
Well, there's a complex question to unpack there, but I'll try to do it simply. The information that people with diabetes are getting about what's going on in their bodies, that they can take action on in the moment, that it matters. We're really bereft. We're really absent most of that information. Mm. We don't make financial decisions about stock trading, as an example, without real-time information about what's going on in the market. We don't make other decisions in our lives about the important things that are happening without getting access to accurate, valid, up-to-date information. But people with diabetes have been forced to make decisions about what's going on in their body, and then moreover about dosing a deadly drug like insulin, or about making choices about food or stress or sleep or exercise each day and every day without really getting an accurate picture about what's going on in their bodies. And most importantly, an up-to-date and real-time picture about what's going on in their bodies. And so companies like Dexcom and Abbott, as an example, have done a tremendous job at bringing to market real-time continuous glucose monitoring, largely, and I say this largely for the type 1 population.
Right.
And as you know, I am a type 1 person with diabetes. I dose multiple injections every single day, and I need to have that accurate real-time glucose information so that I know that when I dose insulin, I'm dosing it properly, or at least attempting to dose it properly, right? And as every type 1 diabetic knows, or person with diabetes knows, it's almost impossible to get insulin injection dosing right, and to get your time in range, accurate. But for the type 2, or for the person who, type 2, for the pre-diabetic, or for the person on orals or medication only, or the person who's injecting basal insulin once daily, or even for the type 2 who's on multiple daily injections, it's really difficult to get that real-time information about what's going on in their bodies for the decisions that matter to that type of person, right? I bifurcate the decision-making in the sense that the person with type 1 is really focused on getting that insulin dose right. And the CGM is a really great tool. It's engineered and designed, in effect, to give you that accurate information so that you can dose properly. The person who has type 2 diabetes, or who is, a little less far along on the progression of diabetes, are making choices not about insulin, but about food and exercise. And other things, of course, but largely around eating the right foods, making the right lifestyle choices, and getting the right amount of exercise in their bodies so that their longer term trends can reflect improved glucose control. Does that make sense to you? The type 1 is largely focused on the insulin dosing regimen, and the rest of the folks are largely focused on things that are not insulin dosing.
Well, and not only does it make sense to me, Jeff, I see it in my house because my son lives with type 1 and my husband lives with type 2. And my husband occasionally will wear a sensor. He's actually trying out the Libre 3 right now. And he is very focused on what he's eating. And he is continually I know this isn't funny, but it does make me laugh because even after all this time, he is continually surprised at what makes his blood sugar go up. We think these more healthy foods with some hidden sugars and that sort of thing. Whereas my son is using the CGM in a closed loop system, or as close to it as we have right now, and is using it to dose insulin. So I hear you loud and clear. And I will also add that my husband doesn't usually wear a sensor because it's, it can be expensive. It's not something that he feels like he just doesn't seem to use it in the same way that my son does, obviously, because of the differences between them.
And so you're highlighting, in your own family, in your own household, the differing needs of different types of people with diabetes. And we see a need for a purpose-built, purposefully engineered, purposely designed product that more meets the needs of that latter group, or the non-type 1 user, such that the types of information that they're getting about what's going on in their body is more relevant to the types of choices that they need to make to stay healthy with their body. Again, a continuous glucose monitoring product that's geared towards the insulin dosing user who's trying to titrate properly or get that dose properly aligned with what's going on in their body needs a different type of thing than the person who's trying to make choices about food, exercise, or the longer term health and wellness of a different type of user. And so when we look at the market, you asked, the question was why, with 30 different CGMs, in development, et cetera, and 2 dominant players really doing a great job meeting the needs with a great product. The G7, the Libre 3, they're great products that really meet the needs of those users. And we're not trying to be that. We're trying to create a purpose-built product that meets the needs of a different type of user who's making a different type of choice. And the choice has to be a different type of closed loop. The closed loop for call it the type 2 user who's maybe on orals is about learning what's going on in their body, learning what foods and exercise impact their blood sugars, and bring the decision-making about those types of choices to the moment at which they're making the choice. And it's that information, that closed loop of information of what I'm doing and what's going on in my body, and then what choices I make, and then what does that do to my body, and what's going on in my body, and what choices I make. It's that loop of information that we're trying to close for the type 2, different than a closed loop insulin delivery system. So I just want to caveat that. And the only way to do that effectively is to make sure that the cost profile of the device itself is more in line with what you'd see with BGM than what you're seeing, as your husband aptly noted, with expensive CGM. I think we're seeing a need for a product that can address those types of market needs. And then when you marry that sensing product with a digital platform like OneDrop that already has proven in well over 40 clinical studies peer-reviewed, published, or presented, that we can lower A1C or increase, activity or decrease the amount of carbs people eat and help people lose weight. That system married with a device that's giving you continuous feedback, we think can really help an enormous number of people. I'm going to say 19 out of 20 people on the planet that have diabetes do not have access to continuous data. 19 out of 20 people on the planet who have diabetes do not have access to continuous data to make the right choices at the right time. And that's who we're trying to meet the needs of.
So my thinking may be limited here. And I ask this question knowing full well that knowing blood sugar, as you said already, can be incredibly helpful. Not enough people have access, type 1 or type 2, right? There's so many people, as you mentioned, who could benefit from something like this. But when you're talking about the differences between somebody who's using a CGM to titrate and really dose insulin, someone who's using a CGM for exercise and food, the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, that type 2 sensor or that sensor that's not being used for insulin dosing doesn't have to be as accurate. It still has to be accurate, right, in some measure, but doesn't have to have the same accuracy. Is that really the difference you're talking about here? Or is there something else that I'm not understanding as you're talking about the differences and the need?
No, I'm definitely not talking about that.
Okay.
I don't think a type 2 or somebody who's making food and exercise choices should sacrifice any level of accuracy in terms of what the information that they're getting from their body. I don't believe that at all. No, that is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a product that is engineered for a specific use case versus another use case. And the sensing modality, whether, call it some form of metal-coated needle that pierces your skin, that is coated in glucose oxidase, that measures the concentration of glucose in your blood, I don't think anybody should be sacrificing on the quality or accuracy of a sensing modality that works like that. But I am talking about a product experience that is more aligned with the way a type 2 might be making the type of choices that they need to make around food and exercise and around other aspects of their lifestyle that help them stay healthy. And that isn't always related to this constant flow of glucose information. As an example, you need to be making those food and exercise choices, and you need to know when to make them, and you need to know what happens to you when you don't make them. And a product experience that's more geared towards those type of choices, I think, is going to meet the needs of that different population differently.
Got it. You mentioned continuous health sensing, which is a different term than we certainly in the type 1 community have heard. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah. We at OneDrop have over the years now collected, I think, 43 or 44 billion biometric data points from 1.5 million users in 195 countries utilizing OneDrop in 11 languages across 75 different biomarkers. And what has been revealed from all that information that we've been collecting is that predictive analytics that can offer a person the ability to know what's going to happen in their bodies are largely predicated on the ability to measure multiple things at the same time. So when I look at CGM for type 1 today, it really reflects what I'll call a monoline sensing capability, the ability to measure one thing at one time really well. And what we've found is that for this other population, the ability to look at a 360-degree whole person data set is far more valuable for that person to deliver the type of insights that we can deliver, the type of actionable information that a person needs in the moment that they're making a decision, not about insulin. And so we look at the non-monoline sensing capabilities, so multiple analytes in the interstitial fluid, as well as multiple other types of sensing, including activity or sleep or heart rate or those types of sensing capabilities, as crucial to helping that individual make better choices. That 360-degree view, that 360-degree picture of what's going on in your body with the ability to sense multiple things at the same time is what we refer to as continuous health sensing.
So take me through some of that, like my poor husband who isn't here to defend himself. But let's talk about him. He's got your sensor on. He's heading to the gym. How would this help him? Can you kind of take us anecdotally through how it might work?
Yeah, think about monoline CGM today for type 1 as sort of the first generation of CGM, right? It's really good. And we can see a movie of our blood glucose, whereas we used to see a snapshot of our blood glucose, right? With a continuous health sensing device that senses multiple things at the same time, you're really combining multiple movies and the ability to gather a sort of a much more comprehensive picture. So as an example, your husband may have other sensors on his body today that he uses in different ways. He might wear a Fitbit or an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
He might track other things in terms of food through, let's say, other apps. He might have a blood pressure cuff at home that he uses. He might step on a connected scale occasionally. And so the ability to bring together all of those different streams of data into an actionable decision support engine will help that individual make better choices. So your husband may find out that he needs to perhaps put in more time on the Stairmaster or on the treadmill by receiving a predictive insight from OneDrop, knowing that the lunch that he ate might have had a higher glycemic load and therefore, might require a little more workout as he heads to the gym. And knowing that information will allow him to lower his glucose values in a way that he may not have had the insight to do before.
One of the things that OneDrop is very well known for is its personal coaching, right? The idea here that you've got a machine checking you out, whether you're poking your finger or you're wearing a CGM sometime in the future, but you've also got a person on the other end of the line. I assume that's something that would integrate with the CGM. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same sort of high quality, one-on-one dedicated personal coaching that you get in the OneDrop platform today, powered by BGM and a variety of other connected devices. You'd end up with that same support mechanism, but with a more continuous stream of data measuring multiple things at the same time.
You mentioned blood pressure, different monitoring tools. Since we last spoke, it looks like you all have kind of added those things to your portfolio. Are these different? I guess what I'm asking, Jeff, is on the website where it says like complete blood pressure, complete heart health. Are these different devices that OneDrop makes? Can you talk a little bit about that and the weight for diabetes?
Yeah. You know as well as I do that a person with diabetes is typically suffering from multiple chronic conditions. Diabetes is a progressive disease, and it really is just a reflection of this sort of metabolic state that is the result of literally millions of decisions that have been made the previous 10 and 20 and 30 years in your life. And let me just unpack that for a second even further and bash the big food industry. I do believe that we are being inundated with a overwhelming amount of processed food, and that processed food isn't being processed in our body, metabolized in our body in the same way that good high quality whole foods had been up until sort of the explosion of industrial food supply. And so I think that this explosion in diabetes, the explosion in obesity, the explosion in other metabolic chronic conditions like kidney disease and heart disease are a direct result of highly processed foods entering into almost every facet of our lives, and then our bodies being overwhelmed with a different type of fuel that it is struggling to process. And so the diseases that we're now seeing in both type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, obesity, and the downstream comorbidities of chronic conditions like heart disease and kidney disease are a direct result of this sort of influx of foods that our body does not know how to process and then, gets overwhelmed with and then develops insulin resistance to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When we think about what tools a person needs to help manage all of that stuff that is now happening in our bodies, we felt that, it didn't make sense to just offer a person a glucose meter and a coach and the ability to measure your glucose, that it only made sense to help people manage a variety of different inputs so that they understand what's going on in their body. And so we partnered up with Dexcom and with a variety of folks on the type 1 side, but then also the ability to integrate, Withings products into our offering, as well as integrate with thousands of other apps and devices that allow our user to bring in the data that they need to make better choices. So we have direct integration with Withings as an example, and you can buy a scale and a blood pressure cuff and a glucose meter through us and directly have all of that data just flow into the OneDrop experience and have a person get a better picture about what's going on in their body so that they can make the choices that they need.
Most of my listeners will know that you started OneDrop after your own type 1 diabetes diagnosis as an adult and the frustration you found with not having these types of resources. And I'm curious, since founding OneDrop, at least 7 years ago now, right? What has surprised you along that way? Is there anything that you've really thought about either with diabetes or diabetes industry or your own journey with diabetes that you said, I never thought it would be this way?
I thank you for acknowledging that. I was diagnosed in September of 2013, and we founded One Drop 8 years ago in 2014. Never understood how powerful all of this big industrial food lobby and advertising and marketing and impact, this giant industry subsidized by, in essence, the government's subsidies for cheap corn. So if you think about sort of all the way up to, government agri subsidies for corn, and then how that filters through into high fructose corn syrup as an example into the food supply, and then how much of that is impacting the health of every single person, not only in America, but on the planet, you really see the impact of food on our health and how we need to make changes there. Otherwise, the cost of the healthcare for chronic conditions, which represents 9 out of 10 healthcare dollars spent in the US today in a $3 trillion healthcare economy. You're really talking about massive costs related to these chronic conditions that are the result of big food and agri subsidies. But so that sounds like I'm a conspiracy theorist or something like that, but it really was a wake-up call for me. And then what was also, I think, shocking about my diagnosis, but also the resulting understanding of this diabetes industry is like, it's a wacky industry. It functions like no other business I've ever encountered. There are so many things that are in place to, in essence, distort or inhibit the innovation that should be happening. The silos. I mean, when we first decided to make a blood glucose meter, and then when you started to understand how blood glucose meters are marketed and sold and distributed in the US and globally, and then who the players are and how little incentive they had to develop anything new or integrate anything with anything. Connected glucose meters are still today, 9 out of 10 glucose meters sold today are not connected to anything. It's just a person pricking their finger. And there's no incentive in the industry whatsoever to connect those devices to anything else to help an individual make a better choice about more than just a glucose moment in time. And that, sort of reality that you start to go, wow, this industry is so devoted to making its profits from a lack of innovation, that there's so many moats and barriers in place to keep innovation out of the system such that the profits can continue to be milked from the existing product lines worldwide. And again, I sound like a conspiracy theorist again, but I was shocked to try to figure out and understand the logic behind some of what goes on. I'm used to an agile software development environment where we're producing new stuff every 2 weeks, and we're innovating because it's better for the end user. It's better for the customer. It's better for the person who you're trying to help. But the diabetes industry doesn't necessarily always work that way. It has so many conflicting incentives in place in the way healthcare is bought and distributed in the US and globally that you end up with a distinct, sort of stunted growth environment that doesn't really reward innovation, but rewards, in a lot of ways, stagnation. And that doesn't make sense, but it's what it is in the diabetes industry. And so that's why, as I started off the conversation earlier today, where I said, we've been so disappointed as people with diabetes at what goes on in industry, despite some of the innovation. We've been so disappointed at, we've always heard, a cure is coming, or, this device is coming at this point in time. And then it takes 5 years longer for it to even ever get to market. And by the time it's gotten to market, the landscape has changed so much that the product isn't even useful anymore. And so I think some of that is changing. You're seeing, really great innovation in the type 1 space with automated insulin delivery, with connected pumps and pens, and pumps finally talking to CGM, and sort of the hope that innovation is really, moving at a faster clip. But for the 95% of people with type 2, you're seeing things sort of stagnate or move backwards, right? People with type 2 diabetes are getting worse. People are getting fatter. There's more prediabetes. There's more type 2 diabetes, and A1C values are going up, not down. And so despite what is now today $950 billion a year spent in type 2 diabetes globally, and $350 billion spent each year in the US on type 2 diabetes, people are getting worse.
Before I let you go, and this is going to sound like a softball question, but I will ask it anyway, because I really like to hear I like to hear when I get a chance to speak to somebody who, has created a company, is the head of a company, and who lives it day by day. I like to ask these kinds of questions. With all of that pessimism, and I think my listeners do not feel like you're a conspiracy theorist. I think, they're very familiar with the stagnation in the diabetes industry. Do you feel like One Drop is making a difference?
I sure hope so. I get up every day hoping and I'm going to work every day with that in mind, that we want to transform the lives of every single person on the planet with diabetes. And I get up every day to do that. I'm excited every single day to get together with my team and look at how we can navigate this crazy system, but build products and services that hopefully will meet the needs of folks and help them change their lives. And I can't do it any other way. So I'm really hopeful and I am an optimist and I am excited every single day that I wake up to get the opportunity. It's a blessing and an opportunity for me to be able to, think about these problems and hopefully try to make a difference. And so I hope One Drop is doing that. I hope that our users are getting a lot out of our products and services. I know I see, some of the feedback that we get, and we don't get it right every time. And we certainly, screw it up sometimes. And we absolutely are not meeting the needs of everybody that we wish we could. But I sure hope every day that I'm getting up for a reason to and getting excited and hopeful and optimistic about the impact that we can make on people with diabetes, because that's what I get up every day to do. And it's what I live for.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you spending some time, and keep us posted on the development of this new sensor. It's really exciting to watch.
Oh, thank you for having me, Stacey. And appreciate everybody for tuning in.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information on the upcoming sensor from One Drop and more info about Jeff, including our past interviews, all of that in the show notes wherever you are listening, or as always, over at diabetes-connections.com. Each episode has its own page. You can find that by clicking on the episode tab, or you can certainly search. We have a very robust search, and the box on the upper right is there to help you out. All right, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. I posted something recently that was, it was from when we first got Share and Follow, in 2015, I want to say. And I got all these comments in my local group about, how did you do it before? And, I got to be honest with you. I mean, we did it and he was fine, but man, it has changed so much. Forget Share and Follow. Before Dexcom, we would check doing a finger stick the same time every day. We had a whole schedule at home and at school, but whenever extra we needed to as well. And it is amazing to think about how much our diabetes management has changed with Share and Follow. You don't have to stop what you're doing to get up and check your kid. I know exactly what's going on, and I can help him out when he wants me to. We've had a lot of conversations over the years, and so we both know the parameters there. But using the Share and Follow apps have really helped us talk less about diabetes, which I never thought would happen with a teenager. And trust me, he loves that part too. And that is what is so great about the Dexcom system. I think for the caregiver or the spouse or the friend, you can help the person with diabetes manage in the way that works for your individual situation. Internet connectivity is required to access Dexcom Follow. Separate Follow app required. Learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. I'm juggling a couple of different episodes right now, so I don't want to overcommit to something that doesn't come through. But I'm hoping to have at least one more technology episode before the end of the year. We did a kind of a crystal ball last year, made some predictions. So we will have an episode seeing how right we were and how wrong we were. That will probably happen in January. I like doing that a lot, and we'll do that again for 2023. And I'm going to be pulling the Facebook group in the next couple of weeks because I'm probably going to make a few changes for next year. We always tweak things a little bit. These main interview episodes won't change at all. It's the newscast and some other projects I've been working on that may change a little bit. As I've said before, I think the frequency of the newscast will change in 2023. Probably it will switch to every other week. But I think that's enough. But I haven't quite decided. And you know me, I can change things around. I got to say, I feel like the last part of this year has just sped by. I mean, since October, it's been like pedal down nonstop. So I'm sure you're the same way. Boy, here we go. I hope everybody stays healthy as we get towards the holidays. hang in there. All right, thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you, as always, for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. We do have a newscast this week, so I will see you back here in just a couple of days. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.